Well, it's goes exactly till 9:30, correct? Or what's
Until 9:30, yes. All right, we're almost ready. Make sure everybody's signed in. All right. Hey, Sanam, I see you there. Okay. All right, you guys sign in. You sign in. You're good. All right, cool. Before we start today's class, do you guys have any questions? Anything you'd like to address? Obviously, you guys started today, so you might not have any questions regarding the previous chapters. But if you have any questions, or you guys at home, if you have any questions, please ask now in the Zoom chat, or those of you watching on YouTube, just make sure you put it on the YouTube chat as well. All right? Giving some more time for people to check in. So we have to do this in every single chapter, by the way. So, I'm sorry?
you saying check-in?
Yeah, with every chapter, you have to do the check-in. Just to make sure, it's mainly for the ones at home, because when we go on a quick break, some people take longer breaks. But also for you guys here, I need to make sure I have your attendance. They did not run out halfway through class, right? All right, let's see. Josh is asking, I saw that we were scheduled for class on Saturday, but the schedule is listed as a real estate exam. So no, we don't have classes on Saturdays, not for this session. But the school exam is on a Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. All right. If that, if your schedule does not match a school exam, then we'll try to figure something else out. But as of right now, all exams are every 3 weeks on a Saturday at 10 a.m. from 10 to 2. Okay. So no classes, but exam. Quizlet, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. From Quizlet or from the review questions at the end? Okay, hold on. You can. That's fine. As long as it's about a previous chapter and not the chapter that we're in right now, it's totally fine. Because we didn't cover it yet, that's all. So what's your question? Mm-hmm. What is the question? Regarding real property? Okay. Okay. And what is your exact question? So let me just read the question to you guys, and then I'll try to figure out what your issue is with the question. All right. So the question is, which of the following is considered real property? A tree growing on a parcel of land. B, a tree that has been cut down and is lying on a parcel of land. C, a tractor used to mow grass on a parcel of land. Or D, a prefabricated shed not yet assembled on a parcel of land. What's your question? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the question is, which of them is considered real property? right? What's the difference between real property and personal property? That's the first thing you need to ask yourself. Real property? Okay. So real property is anything that's fixed, immobile. So if it moves, it's personal property. It's not real property. Real estate means you own it. Somebody owns it. There's an asset, right? You own it. But it's still real property, okay? The only difference between real property and real estate is that real estate is owned by someone. Real property was built. It's what's distinguish personal property from real property is what's built on it, and it's fixed and immobile. That's what it is. Okay, so in this question is asking what is considered real property. So the first thing you need to think is what is fixed or attached to the land. Out of these answers, you have, you have the tree. The tree is attached to the land. So that's the first thing you need to think of is what is real property, what is personal. Real property, fixed. Which one of these is fixed? So you have a tree growing on a parcel of land. You have a tree that has been cut, so it's not attached anymore. You have a tractor, definitely something that can move. And you have a shed that's not yet assembled, so it's not fixed yet. So by process of elimination, you got three things that could be moved and one that cannot. You were thinking about the state. That's what you're trying to figure out. Got it. Mm-hmm. All right. But now we're good. Cool. Let's see here. Stephanie, the 12-year-old according to Lewis. You look 12, by the way. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah. So can I see your ID? Because you need to be 18 to take this class. All right, so someone can own the land and someone else can own the property. That's what you're asking. Well, we already talked about owning individual rights, but this is different because we're talking about land and real property technically go in the same platform. So land and real property go together. You could own land if it's raw land, if there was nothing that was improved on the land, right? So you can buy land by itself. If there's an improvement on the land, it's now considered real property, right? And if you own it, it's real estate, right? So it's not that property goes separate. But if it's personal property, Stephanie, if it's personal property, yes, it could be sold completely separate. Yeah.
Obviously, like, build.
So the shed, once it's built and permanently attached, it becomes real estate. Unless, so you guys were not here, I'm going to do a quick, take advantage of this to do a quick review. There's 4 methods to figure out if it goes with the property or not, right? And this is to figure out if it's a fixture or not, right? So a tree is fixed to the property and it's part of the property and it was already there, most likely, right? Where a shed has to be built and it has to be put in place, just like the structure of the house. It was personal property, 2x4s, sheetrock, and all that stuff, and then they built it and attached permanently. So depending on how it was attached and what was the intention, if you guys remember Maria, method of attachment, relationship of the parties, the intention of the person putting the item there, if the shed was intended to be permanently fixed, then you would see how it was attached was for that purpose. But can we have a shed put on a concrete slab and then be removed later on? Sure. So we need to know what was the intention of the person that installed it first, right? And the relationship of the parties and how adapting it to the property make it unique or not. If by taking the shed out, it damages the property and its value, then it's a fixture that goes with the property. You understand? So it's how it's adapted that makes that change. But while it's on the ground, unassembled, it's personal property, movable. And Louis, Stephanie has something for you. She's 22, so you're off by 10 years. All right? She's just trying to say that she can have drinks. That's all. Anyway, so Whipping has a question. Could you give an example regarding life estate? All right. So, what is life estate? Estate is ownership. We already know that, and possession of the property. Life estate is when I sell. So, Stephen and Louis, as you guys do not know, Louis, you took your name tag, man. Terrible, terrible. So a life estate, there you go. A life estate is when the property is sold to you for as long as you're alive. So, Stephen, I'm going to sell the property to you, my house, and it's now yours, but as long as you're alive. Or I can also put it against his life. So as long as Louis is alive, the property is yours. So every time you see life estate, means you own the property as long as you or someone else, depending on who we name, is alive. The moment you die, you lose the property, meaning you cannot pass it down to your heirs. It reverts back to me, the seller. All right, so life estate, I sell to you with that condition. That's what it is.
What if you're dead?
First of all, have you seen how pale I am? All right, I never die. I've been on this earth for thousands of years.
You're a vampire.
Vampire, yes, thank you. I was on the original cast for Vampire Diaries and all that stuff, yes.
I believe you.
I know, I believe myself too. But anyway, but if I die, then it goes to my heirs. The thing is that I sold to you, Whipping, I sold to you with that condition. So it never goes down to your heirs. It reverts to me or my heirs. Or, does anybody remember what a remainderment is? Remainder interest or a remainderment? Let me know in the chat if you guys remember that. Yep, you're right. I saw that 3 right there. Yep. Third party, right? So what is a remainderment? Both in the feasible or determinable, right? Or in a life estate, you own the property, but if you break the condition, right? Like Ron yesterday, I gave him the house as long as he uses for hospital purposes. So there's a condition, the property is yours, you can do whatever you want, right? Except change the purpose, right? Or in the life estate, as long as you're alive. The moment you die or the moment Ron changed the purpose, right? You lose the property. It either comes back to me, it's called a reversionary interest, comes back to me, or it goes to a third party that I put on the deed, and that third party is called a remainderment. Whoever remains. It's not a seller, it's not a buyer, it's just somebody else that we named on the transaction. Okay? I know it's going to get a little confusing for you and for Brenda being the first day, but I'll repeat this over and over and over again in the first couple of weeks, okay? Andrea M, in that condition? What condition? Brenda, it's not third party on the will, it's a third party on the deed. Will is when you die and you pass it along to your heirs. We're talking about deed, which is a document that transfers the ownership from seller to buyer, okay? So you were great on saying third party on something, but it's on the deed, not the will. Let's see. Oh, okay. Andrea M. What about price changes? What do you mean price changes? So if you change the purpose, it might increase the value actually. But I'm selling it to you with that condition. I can give you land. So in the previous book that we were using, Dearborn Edition, the condition was you keep the land as wildlife, meaning you cannot build anything on it. You know that when you build something on it, you're improving it. If you're improving it, it increases value. But when I sell to you, I don't care about the value. I care about the purpose of the land. You understand? So the value change does not affect the ownership. The purpose change affects the ownership. Is that it? Okay, good. All right. Let's go back to... All right, let's see. All right, and this decided to freeze again today. What's going on? Give me just 1 second, okay? Computer's running some updates, so it's just froze.
Do you guys send emails often? Have received.
No, I know. I was actually going over that today. There was some type of glitch a couple of months ago on our software, and your emails, both of you, and 3 more people actually, were not receiving emails from me. All right, I just blasted an email for everybody this weekend. Almost everybody got it. Apparently, you guys didn't, and I apologize for that. But I'm gonna take care of adding your emails to the list.
Automatic A first test.
Ah, that would be great. Ownership. What we're going to talk about now, guys, is how we can own property. And what I mean by that is if it's one person, if it's 2 people, if it's married people, not married people, if it's under a business name, right? How can we own property? That's what we're going to go over today, okay? In this chapter. So this is different. This is different from heirs. This is different from regular sales. We're just talking about people on title, right? And how we define that type of ownership, okay? So let's start with sole ownership. Okay. Under sole ownership, it's called tenancy in severalty. 2 things I want to point out. If you guys remember from yesterday, we said that there's 2 types of tenants. There's freehold tenants and there's leasehold tenants, right? I mentioned that because tenancy pretty much has to do with occupancy or possession, okay? Occupancy or possession. So freehold tenant means you are the owner. Leasehold tenant, as the name says, there's a lease. So if there's a lease, you're a renter, not the owner. You have limited rights to the property. Okay. Now the other thing we have here is severalty, and you see the word several right here, and you think, well, how can it be one person if it's several? It's not. The fact that it has several T means separated from the several, separated from everybody else, right? So tenancy in several T means cut off from anybody else, means it's just me and nobody else can claim the property other than me, all right? So tenancy in severalty, you guys got to remember, it's one person or entity. one person, or entity. And that is tenancy in severalty. Okay? All right. While you guys writing, just a quick check. If you're watching on YouTube, let me know if you can hear me, if everything is great. Give me a thumbs up, an emoji with a thumbs up on YouTube. You guys are good, I see. Great. YouTube, I cannot see them, so I need to request it. All right. So tenancy and severalty. Like I said, it's a single party. And that could be, again, me as an individual, or it could be all of us under an LLC, because it's one LLC, right, that owns it. It's in severalty. If it's two LLCs, like let's say the Zoom Group LLC and the resident, I'm going to call you guys the Resident Group LLC, and we go into a joint venture, we buy the property together, where our LLC owns it with their LLC on Zoom, right? So that's two. Because it's two entities, it's no longer considered in severalty, okay? All right, great. So YouTubers, you can hear me. Make sure you guys ask questions along the way. Eduardo, I'm going to charge you more for that, man. I'm always charging, so you guys know.
Not that money, bro.
Of course. Times are tough. Pandemic, you know? All right, I just sent it to you guys.
At least they get heat in their house. We don't get heat in here.
What, you cold? I got to keep you awake, man. I was actually going to make it even colder, so you guys are, you know. That's it. All right. So, as we said, if a single party owns the fee or life estate, the ownership is in severalty, tenancy in severalty, and the synonyms are sole ownership, ownership in severalty, or estate in severalty. Okay? When the would-be sole owner is a husband or wife, state laws may require homestead, dower and courtesy, or the electric chair. You guys remember electric chair, right? You remember electric chair? You weren't here yesterday, so you can't remember it.
I know the electric chair.
What is electric chair? Go ahead.
They kill you for doing a crime.
Yes, so the crime here is you were married and you died first. So you went through the elective share. That's what it is. So it's elective share.
Not electric chair.
No. All right. Look, I'm a dad, so I always have these dad jokes, so get used to it.
I'm a dad too.
Great. Congratulations. So the issue here is between husband and wife. That's what I was saying, right? And if it, depending on the state that you're in, they allow what's called homestead, which is your primary residence. When you die, your surviving spouse gets the house, period. Right? Most states, that's the way it is. We also have dower and courtesy. Now, with dower and courtesy, right? Dower and courtesy, we talked about this yesterday. With dower courtesy, it's an ancient right where dower is for the wife. When the husband dies, she receives all the assets that used to be owned by the husband, regardless of whether her name was there or not, right? Courtesy is the opposite. Courtesy is where the husband gets everything if the wife dies first. Rare cases, but it might happen, right? Usually husband dies first. We know how it is. And you're saying yes, right? Of course a woman will say yes. He will die first. Mm-hmm. Yep. Anyway, so it's a similar right where you get everything that was owned. As far as the elective share, as we said yesterday, the elective share or right of election is, let's say, Louis, you said you're a dad. Are you married? Okay. So do you have a will? Okay. Let's say you're going to write your will today. You know what? You love your children, children? Children, okay. So you love your children so much, you're going to leave everything to your children. Okay? Everything. But then you die. Of course, because your wife was expecting a big inheritance that you were hiding somewhere. We know this. But then you die. Miraculously, you die. Right. Knock on wood. Yeah. Your wife goes to court. She's listening? Okay. Okay. So let's say your wife goes to court, because we'll talk about this in a different chapter. But when somebody dies, you got to go through probate court always. When you go to probate court, the judge looks at the will if there's one, or goes to state law if there's no will. But if your will says everything goes to your children, how do you think your wife is going to feel? Well, your widow is going to feel.
Happy.
That everything went to the kids?
Yeah.
Okay. So you think it has to do with greed?
Yeah.
Not like compensation for putting up with you?
No, absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right. So here's the thing. The right of election or elective share is a protection that was created for surviving spouses. If you leave nothing in the will for your surviving spouse, he or she has the right of election. The right to show up in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, the will says 0, but I know based on state law, I'm entitled to X percentage of whatever the assets were. So whatever you're giving to your children, your spouse is entitled to a percentage of it, no matter what the will says. That's what the elective share is. Okay? You guys got it at home? Thumbs up? Great. Awesome. I know it's a lot of information the first couple of days, but we keep on repeating this stuff. So it'll be way easier as we go. Second week, third week, it gets easier and easier. Okay? All right. So again, this has to do with marriage-related claims. The estate of a deceased tenant in severalty passes to heirs by probate. Now, one of the things I want to point out, because there's different types of ownerships, as we just said. This one's tenancy in severalty, so one owner, right? Is that in a tenancy in severalty, the estate, so the assets, they pass to the heirs by probate. Now, this is different from another one we're going to talk about later, where it does not go to your heirs. No matter what you do, you can put in the will, but your heirs do not get it. In a tenancy in severalty, you can pass it to your heirs if you choose to. Okay? You have to remember this. Okay, Eduardo, what about when his or her mother is in the will as owner after he or she... Okay, hold on, I'm a little lost here. The mother is in the will or the deed, Eduardo? In the will or the deed? Because if the mother's in the deed, it does not matter if it's mother, daughter, if it's a wife, if it's a cousin, if it's your neighbor. If you're an owner, you're an owner. So you don't lose the ownership, okay? One person dies, that person's ownership percentage goes to the heirs, okay? The other persons, so let's say the two of us, Eduardo, right? We own property together, right? So forget mother, forget all that. We own property together. When you die, and yes, guys, I'll never die in my examples, just so you know. When you die, Eduardo, right? Your shares go to your heirs, okay? If that's the type of ownership we have, right? So nobody's going to take my ownership because I own it independently, a percentage. Now, you're talking about a will. If it's a will, and I put everything to the kids, or maybe I didn't put to the kids, I gave to the mother, maybe I gave to the cousin. You know what? Maybe I gave to Red Cross Foundation. In the will, I can give to whoever I want, but a surviving spouse has the right of election. So it doesn't matter who you leave your assets to, okay? The surviving spouse always has the right of election. You got it? Okay, cool. All right, next one, co-ownership. Now there's two different types of co-ownership for non-married people. That's the tenancy in common, and that's the joint tenancy. So what I want you to do here is write not married. Okay? While this one is married. Okay? So tenancy in common is two or more people that own property together, but they're not married, right? So, Eduardo, we own property together. We're not married. We are tenants in common, okay? or we could choose to be joint tenants. You guys understand? Now, property that's purchased while married, all right? So property that's purchased while married is called ownership with a tenancy by the entirety. So that means that husband and wife or spouse and spouse, right, entirely own the property. So when one dies, the other one automatically receives the property. That's the way it is. Okay, but only for property acquired while married. I'm going to go in detail. I want to give you an idea of not married and then married, what classifies. Okay? So tenancy in common, I'm going to refer to as TICs as we go. And this one is a JT. So as we go, this is what I'm going to refer to. So you got to remember always TICs or JTs. So let's start with tenants in common or TICs. Next page. Tenants in common or TICs. If you have any questions, you can stop me. Ask, okay? All right, so the tenancy in common, also known as estate in common, is the most common form of ownership. So this might be asked in the state exam. That's why it's highlighted. The most common. It's the most common because it's automatic. People usually don't go, hey, I want to be a joint tenant. First of all, majority of people are not explained what a joint tenancy is, which is the next one. So they go by a standard transaction where you'll be named as a tenant in common. That's why it's the most common. All right? Think about that. Tenant in common is the most common. Tenant in common is the most common. When you get to the state exam, if that question is there, which one of these is the most common or automatic in a transaction, real estate transaction? And they're going to tell you all the options. Which one is the most common? Which one is the most frequent? Which one is the automatic one? It's the TIC, tenant in common. Okay? Remember that. So the defining characteristics of tenant in common is that there's two or more owners, right? Because if there was only one owner, what type of ownership would this be? Anybody? If it was only one?
Sole ownership.
It's a sole ownership, but what is the other? It's tenancy, what? Right? Severalty. All right, severalty. Perfect. So if there's only one, it's severalty. If there's two or more, automatically it's called what? TICs, tenants in common, unless we choose otherwise. Okay? We have identical rights. Interests are individually owned, and we have what's called electable ownership shares. Now I want to point this one out. Okay? Sorry. Okay. Elective ownership shares. What does this mean? It means I can choose to own a property with you where I'm 70% owner and you are 30% owner. Right? Or we're 50-50. If we choose to. If we agree to. And by the way, it's not a matter of money. That's another thing you guys need to remember, is that the shares have nothing to do with money. I could put $1, I could put $0, and still have 70% ownership. How do I do that? For instance, if we're investing in a real estate deal and I tell you I'm going to do all the work, right? You're just putting in the money, right? I'm giving you a return that's equal to what you're putting in. Mine is worth more because it's the knowledge, right? These are the things you need to remember. You can create agreements where you don't put any money in. Somebody else does. Or somebody else puts the credit or whatever it might be. So remember, for state exam purposes, the amount of money does not equal the amount of shares. So if I put $70,000 and you put $30,000, we could still be 50-50, right? You guys understand? If I put $1 and you put $99,999, right? We could still be 50-50. We could be 70-30 even though I put $1, all right? We choose our shares. That's what we said, electable. Every time we see electable, it's optional. You choose the shares. You guys got it? Okay, this is a key feature you need to remember, because the next one we're going to talk about, we have to have equal shares. There's no election here. We are equal. If I put $1, we're 50-50. Okay, this one, elected. We can choose the amount of shares. The other thing we have in the next one, and we don't have in this one, is survivorship. There's no survivorship. There's no survivorship in the tenancy in common. What does this mean? You guys remember I said earlier, husband and wife or spouse and spouse, one dies, the other one acquires? That's called survivor of the group. In the tenancy in common, there's no survivorship. What does that mean? It means that when you die, your shares go to your heirs. The next one we're going to talk about, joint tenancy, when you die, your shares come to me. That's called right of survivorship. Okay? So in a tenancy in common, there's no right of survivorship. Shares could be uneven, right? And that's key in the state exam. Because when you're reading the question, if it says John owns 2/3 and Adam owns 1/3 of this property, automatically, what is this? There's two or more people, so automatically cannot be tenancy and severalty. There's two or more. And they have unequal shares, so automatically we're talking about ticks. You guys understand? Automatically. If the question said they have 50-50, now we need to read a little bit more. Unequal, automatically ticks. Okay? So these are a few pointers that I'll give you throughout the next couple of weeks for the state exam. Things to look at in the question that will determine the answer right away. Right? Like we did with a real property a couple of minutes ago. Right? Just the way it is. Things you need to remember. So if it's unequal shares, tenants in common immediately. If it's equal shares, let's read a little bit more. That's what it is. Okay? And I'll talk about unity of time later. Okay, we already talked about this. Electable owner shares. I'm going to mark again what you need to read about it. And no survivorship. Okay? So these are the two things you need to remember from ticks, besides being two or more owners. Electable ownership shares, no survivorship. Okay. You guys were not here, so I'm going to tell you the same thing I mentioned yesterday, Stephen and Lewis. Don't focus so much on the highlighting. If you have to, you see how I did the brackets here? Yeah. Okay, do the same thing, highlight later, or you have the PDF in the student portal. All right, focus more on taking notes, which are way more important than the highlighting part. Okay. All right. Calvin, what's up, man? Good seeing you. All right. So this will be an example of tenancy in common. Tenancy in common, you have initial interest. Let's say, see, unequal. We have 20%, we have 30%, and we have 50% between A, B, and C, right? If C, that owns 50%, right, sells the shares to D and E, right, they're individually sold, not a problem. In all of these ownerships, you can sell it individually. So I sold to D and E. So now we have, after the sale, or after the transfer, now we have A, B, D, and E, because C sold, right? So they're out. And they all have unequal shares. So there's now 4. There was 3. Now there's 4 tenants in common. Okay? What about when somebody dies? You guys remember I said that there's no right of survivorship, right? Yeah. So what does that mean? It means that when you die, your shares go to your heirs. So A, let's go back to the original owners, A, B, and C. A passed away. Okay? The 20% that's owned by A was placed in the will to D and E. So the same scenario. We now have 4 tenants in common. We have B, C, D, and E, because D and E took over A's shares. You got it? Thumbs up? Great. You guys got it? We're good so far? Great. So when somebody dies in the tenants in common, it goes to the heirs. All right. Now it's the crazy one. JT. Joint tenancy. JT, joint tenancy. Okay. Now, this is the same thing as tenants in common because it talks about two or more people not married. So again, as I said right in the beginning, not married. It's just that ticks are automatic. Joint tenancy, you have to choose to own as a JT. Okay? That's the biggest difference. That's the immediate difference between them. Now, in a tick, you own your own shares. Okay? But in a JT, there's 4 people, we're 1. There's 10 people, we're 1. So we collectively own it as if we were one person, much like a marriage. Okay, so this becomes more like a marriage. All right? Now, the rights and interests, look at this. The rights and interests are indivisible and equal. Okay? And the property cannot be divided. So we cannot say, hey, this is your corner, that's your corner, this is my corner. No, cannot. We own the property, all the property, the whole property equally, right? Okay, the next thing it says is that joint tenants may only convey their interests to outside parties as tenants in common. So let's say that I want to sell my shares in this joint tenancy. Can I? The answer is yes. We can always sell, right? But if I sell my interest in a joint tenancy, whoever buys the interest is no longer a joint tenant. They are ticks. I'll explain this better as we go, okay? It gets confusing. Joint tenants have to be the originals, okay? Joint tenants have to be the originals. Anybody that comes after is considered a tick. Why? Because for a joint tenancy to exist, it has to have certain characteristics. Unity of ownership, equal ownership, the transfer of interest, and key survivorship, right? Okay. So under unity of ownership, where tenants in common holds their separate title to their individual interest, joint tenants together hold a single title to the property. Equal ownership. Do you guys remember I could have 30% and you can have 70% or vice versa? Well, under JT, that cannot happen. You have to have equal shares without exception. Equal shares without exception. Leany, close. Very close. It's time, title, interest, and possession. We'll get there. But very close. Good job. All right. The next thing is transfer of interest. Just like in the tick, I was saying you can sell or transfer your interest, right? You can transfer or sell your interest. But whoever is the outsider that's now joining the group is now a tick, not part of the original group. I will draw this in a second so it will make more sense. And survivorship. What is survivorship again? When you die, your shares go to the survivors of the group. So let's say we have, here we have 4 people in class, as an example, and we decide to buy a property together as JT, joint tenants. Okay? So, Stephen, when you die, guess what? It's just one less person in the group. So now instead of having a quarter each, we have 1/3 each. Got it? Louis, when you die, guess what? It's now 50-50 between me and Lidiane. And when I kill her, I have 100%. Simple as that. All right? Sorry. I'm always the survivor in my examples. Get used to it. Yes, but Who cares? At least I'm honest about it. There's a lot of disclosures. Nobody can hold against me. If I ever go to jail for, or somebody takes me to court or whatever, I have proof. I said I was going to. Right? I gave a fair warning. I gave you a heads up. Anyway, so the point is, Mr. Marlin, welcome. See you right there. So the point is, in a JT, there's the right of survivorship. That's the point. It's just one less person in the group. Now, this survivorship feature passes without probate proceedings. Do you remember we started the class talking about elective share, right? We said that the elective share is when somebody dies, you got to go through probate court, and the spouse has to say, hey, wait a minute, right? I have the right of election, as an example. So when somebody dies, you have to go through probate, but not in this case. If you own the property as a JT, nobody's entitled to the asset other than the survivors of the group. So we predetermined that this is left out of the will, no matter what. This is left out of the estate, no matter what. Okay? So, Stephen, you died first. Your heirs get nothing. Sorry. Meaning they don't have ownership rights to this property. Louis does. Liliana does. I do. When Louis dies, his heirs get nothing. In terms of ownership, they get nothing. We might make an internal agreement between us where, hey, when one of us dies, our heirs will still receive X amount of dollars or percentage of the income that comes from the property. We can, but not ownership. Because remember, this chapter is about who's on title and who has the rights to the property. You guys understand?
I die.
Great question. So yes, let's say that there was the three of us and Louis said, you know what? I'm going to die anyway because I already know Bruno is the killer. So let me sell to Steven before I die. At least Steven now is a tick. He can leave it to the heirs. Absolutely. Whoever was the outsider of the original group, right, does not have the right of survivorship. So the thing is, Steven, if I die first or if she dies first, you get nothing from our shares. But yes, if you die, because you are a tick, you're not part of the original group, your heirs get it. Absolutely. I'm going to illustrate right now. Sorry. I don't like the example that's here, so I'm going to show you a different example. Guys, make sure your cameras are on. If your cameras are not on, it does not count towards your hours. Remember that. Muhammad's always trying to run away, man. Always. You guys think I'm not looking? I'm always looking. Always. All right. Let's imagine. Oh. Sorry. Let's imagine this as being 100% ownership. Okay? 100% ownership. So this circle. Now, if I have property, is there's just one person there, just A, what type of ownership is this? From what we know right now, what type of ownership is this? Sole ownership or? One person. Tenancy in severalty. Okay? Tenancy in severalty. One owner. Tenancy in severalty. Now we're going to add, let's say we purchased this property. There's three people, A, B, and C. Hold on. And we're going to make this and this. Crazy ownership separation right here. What do we have? What is this? Tick. Why is it a tick? Perfect. So if you guys look at it, it's not equal shares. So this is a tick, tenancy in common. It does not have equal shares. Now, can a tick have equal shares? What'd you say? You said no. The answer is yes. A tick can have equal shares, right? Stephanie, the 12-year-old, just answered for you. Yes. So, can have equal shares was what I told you guys. It's automatically equal if we don't say anything, right? So you automatically say that it could be a tick. But we can have different shares if we choose to. It's elective shares, okay? When it comes to a tick. Could it be equal? Yes. Can it be different, right? Unequal shares? Yes. So we need to read a little bit more. If it says there's no right of survivorship, it's a tick. If it says right of survivorship, then it's a JT. All right. Now, oh, actually, let me go back to this. Now, let's say that C dies. When C dies, who gets the shares if it's a tick? I'm sorry? Heirs. Okay? I want to make a clear distinction. There's a lot of people that don't understand this. Heirs does not necessarily mean kids. Okay? Because if you have no kids, your immediate heir could be your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, your immediate heirs could be your parents, and so on. So heirs is whoever you determine or whoever survives you to receive the assets. I'm sorry? If you want to put in a will that everything goes to a dog, yes. If you don't have a will, then the state will not give it to a dog. But if you have a will that says, hey, the dog gets all my $54 million, right? True stories. Then yes. Okay. So remember, when C dies in the tick, the shares go to heirs. Okay. Having trouble with this thing. All right. Shares go to heirs. When C dies, shares go to heirs. But this is only in a tick. Yes. Okay, so if he doesn't have kids and he doesn't have a will, the state will determine who gets what. So every state has different rules. It's called the laws of descent and distribution. If you don't have a will, the state determines who gets what. Nephews, nieces might not be in that list. So they're first going to try to find a significant other, then they're going to try to find the kids, then they're going to try to find the parents, sometimes cousins or grandparents could be the heirs. Every state has different rules regarding that. That's why it's so important to have a will. Okay? And do it now. You have kids? Do it now. All right? Not later, because we never know when the time's going to come. It's better to be ready, and it's only you can prepare yourself if you want. Right? I don't recommend you do it yourself, but you can if you want. Right? So do it now, because you don't know later, and then it goes to the person you didn't want to give to. There's something called this cheat. We'll talk about a different chapter. But this cheat is if nobody steps up to claim, the government gets it. That's why the will is so important. Right? And if you don't have heirs, guys, I always volunteer to be one of your heirs. Simple as that. Okay. All right, so we got that. Now, we have A, B, and C right here, and there's no partition. There's no separation of the assets, of the shares. What type of ownership is this? Equal, undivided shares. Joshua just answered, it is absolutely a JT. Now, what I was saying before, in the JT, if one of us dies, so let's say A dies, right? What happens to the shares? One less person in the group. A just disappeared mysteriously, right? So now B and C own the property together. Now, what happens when C dies? Great. What is that called? Exactly. That one. So in the state exam, remember, when there's only one, it's the tenancy and that's the one. Okay? So what we're saying is, it used to be a JT, but because now there's only one owner, that's why I told you guys I always survive. You see? Now I'm 100% owner, and because I'm 100% owner, this is tenancy and severalty. If I happen to die, because it could happen, who gets the shares now? The government. No, first they try to give to heirs, but yes, now it goes to heirs. So remember this, guys. In a JT, it never goes to the heirs unless there's one survivor. So only when it reaches the survivor, the last survivor, is when the property can go to the heirs, because it's no longer a JT, right? Correct. It goes to my heirs. Yes. Good so far? It's a very old saying. In the end, there can only be one. Okay. All right, let's see. Josh, what happens if A gets married while in the JT? Does that change anything when A decides to step away from the property? Nope. In fact, the reason, Joshua, the reason why I want to have a JT is because of that. I don't know your heirs. I don't know the survivors. I don't know your future spouse or your current spouse. I know you. If you're here, is because you have some type of business mentality. So I'll know you and I'll trust you to get into business with me. You understand? That's what it is. So what we're trying to say is, guys, make sure you keep your phones away. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's a lot of information you already missed yesterday. It's a lot of information. If you guys have distractions, even you guys at home, if you have distractions, it will get tough. All right? So, Joshua, as I was explaining, is since I do not know your significant others, I don't want a survivor, your survivor, to come and tell me how to run the business now. You guys understand? Because the real estate is a business, right? How old are your children?
1 and 17.
How old are you?
40.
Okay. All right. Mask deceives, I guess. I'm about to be 42. But you're already at 40. Great, you're older than me. All right, so that's why I tell everybody that reaches the 40 before I do. So what I was saying is, you're what was it, 21 and 17? You're 21 and 17-year-old. So that 17 couldn't do much, but you're 21. He's gonna step in, or he or she, he's gonna step in and say, Bruno, this was my dad's shares, and I'm entitled to do something with it, so I want you to sell. I want the money. I don't care about what my dad had arranged with you. I want you to sell. What? Or Josh, you said you get married in the process. I don't want your wife to come tell me how to run my business, right? No offense, guys, right? It's not that I don't trust your significant others. It's just we agreed to something together. We purchased a property, right? There's profits that come from it. And now because you decided to die, I have to sell the property? You guys understand?
Yeah.
Right? So we don't want that to happen. And that's why a JT is more of a business decision than an emotional decision. Ticks are like, oh, it's the normal way to go. Right? Everybody does that. Right? A JT is more of a business decision. I know that somebody's going to survive you. Right? I don't want that someone to come tell me how to run the business. Again, it does not mean that we don't come up with an arrangement where, hey, if you die or if I die, we keep on paying a percentage. Think about it like a disability or Social Security type of arrangement, right? You get a percentage of what was the original income. But I'm the sole owner. I'll make the business decisions. I'll decide when to buy, when to sell, whatever. Got it? Good? Great. Yes. Say it again. Say it again. Sorry. Go back.
I'd say Bruno drive us. And
Guaranteed.
and in our agreement, you were supposed to pay the percentage of the income for my kids. And then after that, you decided not, I don't want to do it. Can my earns go after you to claim for the deal?
So the question here is, guys, so you hear it at home as well. The question was, let's say Lady Anna says she died, and right, and we had an agreement that her heirs would get a percentage out of the income, right? And I decided, because I'm the survivor, I decided not to pay that percentage. Can the heirs come and fight? Well, obviously, this type of arrangement would come in writing. So anything that's in writing, you can take to court, right? They cannot claim the ownership. They can claim monies. Whatever's in the agreement, not title, not ownership. But if we said, as in an agreement between us, we said that they will receive X amount of dollars or percentage of the income, right? We're not giving ownership, we're giving profit, a payout. Just like everything else, it's a contract that you can take to court, yeah. But no, they're not claiming ownership. It's my property.
I know, but I'm not gonna die.
You're not gonna die? Okay. We'll see about that. All right, let's see. I got another question here. Hey, Ruth, what's up? Ruth on YouTube. Okay, so Eduardo, are there people willing to make a deal like that under JT terms when somebody dies? So it's what I was explaining, Eduardo. Not many people know that all these options exist. I mean, raise your hand if you knew this before I mention it. Raise your hand. Nobody? You guys here? No? No? So that's your answer. Okay? So you have to understand, there's a lot of stuff you guys are going to learn that it's not known by the common people. In fact, being in this class, you already learned stuff you're already like light years ahead of normal people, which used to be you before you started a class. So wealthy people use most of these resources, obviously, right? Be the survivor of the group, obviously. There's other stuff you guys are going to learn that we don't do, like life estate. We talk about life estate. Who does a life estate? Where I'm going to sell to you as long as you're alive. That's a type of estate preservation where we're saying, hey, 20 years from now you're going to die, or 30 years from now you're going to die, or 50 years from now you're going to die. So it's guaranteed they will come back to me, or as you asked, hey, if you're not alive, who does it go to? So it comes back to me or to the heirs. But who thinks of this stuff? Not us, right? Because we don't know, right? We're not taught these things, right? Our schooling, our educational system is different than the wealthy people. Just the way it is. Wealthy people even have the CPAs that will tell them exactly what to do not to pay as many taxes as we do. You guys understand? Right? So, to answer your question, Eduardo, are people willing to do this? Yeah, the ones that know it. Now that you know this, would you do it, Eduardo? You still wouldn't? Wow. So we're going to get into a business together, and then my kids, if I die first, my kids are going to tell you how to run the business. That's what you want. Are you guys understanding this, guys? Like you literally asking somebody else that's not part of the original deal to tell you how to run your business. Next, Stephanie. So the 12-year-old. I'm going to mess with you the whole time. Stephanie says, so does the JT have to be stated at the time of making the hypothetical purchase? Like the rights and interests should be signed off along with the deed? Great question. And since you asked, here's the answer. So creating a JT. So the next page, guys. Creating a JT. For you to create a JT, there has to be 4 unities. Okay? This is key. A JT cannot exist without these 4 unities. All right, Lini was saying that on YouTube. And the unities are unity of time, unity of title, unity of interest, and unity of possession. Time, title, interest, and possession. Okay? Time, title, interest, and possession. Now, what is unity of time? It means we purchase, we're the originals. We purchase the property all at the same time. So the 4 of us sat down at the same table at the same time, signed all the documents. Okay? So it's not someone that came the next day. No. Today at 4 p.m. we signed this document. And we're now part of the same deed. Unity of title. We're all part of the same deed at the same time. Okay? And we have equal undivided interests. So if there's 4, what do we have? If there's 4, we have 25% each. Undivided. There's no, I could put $1, you could put $100, you could put $300, but we're equal no matter what. And the last one, unity of possession. We have the same right of possession. You cannot tell me that I cannot occupy the property or use the property. Okay, same right of possession. So these are key. 4 unities. Remember that. This is key. 4 unities. Guaranteed state exam question. Hey, Katya. Glad you're here too. All right. 4 unities. Remember that. Oh, you turned the camera on. Good to see you. Everything good? And camera off. Huh? No. I read lips and sign language and all that stuff. What? You guys are funny. All right, are we good? How can we end a joint tenancy or tenancy in common? At the bottom of the page, how do we end joint tenancy or tenancy in common? When there's 2 or more people, how do we end this? Well, it's either we agree to sell, all of us, or we are forced to sell. But who's going to force us to sell? I just gave you an example before. I gave you an example of the heirs stepping up and say, hey, Bruno, we got to sell because I want the money. As an example. This is called a partition suit, or the right to partition. Okay? Right of separation. Now, there's 2 types of partition. There's physical partition and there's judicial partition. A physical partition, it doesn't mention here in detail, but a physical partition is where the property can be divided into 2 parts, or into 3 parts, or into 4 parts, depending on the amount of people. So that's a physical partition. Most of the times, it's impossible to do that, right? So what we do, so that will be a physical partition. And if it's impossible, we have a court order. This is called judicial partition. For instance, guys, if we have a 3-family, we got a 3-family, but there's 2 people that own it. How are we going to split this? If there's a 3-family, there's only 2 people that own it, how are we going to split the property? Physically, it's impossible, right? Eduardo, I think I mentioned that with you yesterday. We purchased a property together, a 3-family. What we're going to divide? 1 floor and a half? How are we going to do this? Impossible. So we have to sell the whole house, and this is called a judicial partition. The court will order the sale in order to satisfy the lawsuit. Okay? It's called judicial. Sell the whole house, we get the money, and we split the money according to our ownership. Okay? So it's either a physical partition, if we can separate it physically, or if it's impossible, the court will order the sale. It's called judicial partition. Stacy, what's up? Oh, you guys cannot see them there. It's on YouTube. You got good moves for a 40-year-old, man. I can't twist like that anymore.
I got to move around.
Yeah. All right. Judicial. We're good. Next one. Tenancy by the entireties. This is between spouses, so we're married now. Okay, it's between married people. Tenancy by the entireties between married people. Okay, it's very similar to a joint tenancy. Very similar, because he has the right of survivorship. Okay, that's the feature, is the right of survivorship. Right? If one person dies, the surviving spouse automatically receives the property. This only happens when we buy property while married, and both our names are there. Or if it's a principal residence, if it's where we live, where we sleep, then no matter what, if it's under my name or your name, it does not matter. The surviving spouse always gets it. Okay? Yes.
What if you're separate?
You said everything right in the beginning. You're married. Right? If you're married and you're separating and you decide to do a purchase while still married, sucks for you. Finalize the divorce and then buy something. That's it. Hey, Sonia, how are you? All right. So you don't buy stuff while married. Oh, I mean, if you intend to separate, that was the point. All right. Stephanie says, what if you have a joint LLC? What's a joint LLC? What's a joint LLC? Let me know. I just want to hear it from her. I mean, read it from her. You want the mic? Not today. It was a one-time. I didn't even charge you yet. I said yesterday I'll charge $5 to give the mic. You know, so you spoke for like 5 minutes and that was it. I mean, partnership. Would it be like a JT? All right. So business ownership. We're gonna go over that later on. Okay. But it's not called a joint LLC. Okay, an LLC could be a sole owner, have more people in it. We don't call it joint LLC. It's just an LLC. It's single member or multiple member LLC. All right, but no, it's not like a JT. All right, so we were talking about tenancy by the entireties. Like I said, it's much like a JT because there's a right of survivorship. There's equal and divided interest. Everything is the same. The only difference, I mean, two differences, is that it's married people and there's no right to partition. What is partition again? Anybody? What is partition? That's what it is? Stephanie goes like,
Divide.
what is it?
The point to divide.
Divide. So every time you see partition is to separate or to divide. Okay? So in a marriage, you don't sue for partition. In the marriage, you sue for? You sue for? What is the only lawsuit that can happen in the marriage? Money? How do you get that money? You have to do what? In a marriage. What is it called? Divorce. It's family court, but it's divorce. Okay? So in a marriage, if you own property together, we cannot sue each other for partition, for separation, where you get that corner, I get this corner. No. The only lawsuit available for a married couple is called divorce. Okay? So there's no right to partition. Okay. All right, so Stephanie says, I'm too lazy to type. Sorry. Well, I asked you if you wanted the mic. Andrea M says, property owns. Okay, remember, divorce. Okay. Okay, so separation in all others is called partition. In a tenancy by the entirety, it's called divorce. Okay. All right. In a tenancy by the entirety, there's no. What I'm saying is there's no right to partition. Okay. To divorce. All right. I want you to go to the next page. We're just going to go through this real quick, where it says estates in trust. Estates in trust. Okay. So we are on page 45, estates in trust. I'm going to go through this real quick because it's not heavily tested. That's the first thing. And second, we have on another chapter as well. All right. So there's a living trust and there's land trust. Now, in an estate in trust, a fee owner, which is the grantor or the trustor, they transfer the legal title to a fiduciary, which is the trustee, who holds and manages the estate for the benefit of another party, called a beneficiary. The trust may be created by a deed, a will, or trust agreement. So what is a trust? It's different than an LLC, which we'll talk about also later. A trust is a document that says, hey, I trust you to handle my affairs, right? So whatever is related to the property, right? And so it's like I'm giving you the power to be my property manager. That's the best way I can explain it. It's like you're the property manager. You handle everything and I benefit from it. You get paid for handling all the paperwork. I'm the beneficiary. So yes, it is a contract, Andrea. So this is what happens. There's a trustor, and the trustor is me. I'm creating the trust. So I trust, let's say I trust Brenda to be my trustee and handle everything that's related to the property. Okay? So I'm going to give you, Brenda, as a trustee, the title, the deed, and create an agreement of what you're going to do. You're going to perform certain duties related to the property on my behalf. That's what it is, certain duties on my behalf. Right? Now, the trustee holds the management of the property, receive the monies of the property, and distribute the monies of the property, just like a property manager. Or they can appoint someone to do so. Okay? So it's just like a property manager. And all the ownership benefits and the remainder duties go to the beneficiary. So one thing you have to remember, I create the trust, but I could also be the beneficiary. It's just that I separated myself from being the owner, right, to just being the beneficiary. I purchased the property, I gave the powers to you, but it's still my property. Right? So I flipped something here. It's almost like a protection, like an LLC, because it separates. Okay? It separates on title. It separates the ownership. So when somebody sues, just like an LLC, when somebody sues based on the property, they cannot sue you, the individual. They will sue the trustee in this case. But the trustee is not the owner, right? So the trustee does not have full liability. They have some, but not full liability, right? So this is what it is. It's a separation, okay? It doesn't protect you like an LLC does, right? It has different types of protection, different type of benefits. And that's why I'm not going heavily on this, because it's not heavily tested either. But it's a separation. That's what you need to remember. A living trust, as the name says, while I'm alive. While I'm alive, you handle everything with the property, and I get all the income from the property. That's what it is. You handle it, I get the income. Okay? While I'm alive. A testamentary trust is different. It's similar to a will, which is when I die, what do you do with it? While I'm alive, what are you doing? When I die, what do you do? That's the difference. Okay? All right, skip to page 47. Then we go to the business entities. Ownership by business entities. Okay. So quickly, what type of ownerships do we have? Guys, type it in the Zoom chat real quick, and you tell me without reviewing, without going back, what type of ownerships do we have? Okay, talk. Oh no. Tick, JT.
Sole owner.
What is it called? That one. This it. And there's one missing. We talked about 4. Dre, not the business one, no. The marriage one. So Stephanie and Mariah just answered by the entirety. The marriage one. Okay? So we have sole if it's 1, right? Then we have ticks if it's 2 or more not married. We could also choose to be JTs if it's 2 or more not married. And we have tenancy by the entirety, 2 people married. Okay? These are 4 types of ownership. For business entities, they can only own it as a severalty, or what do you think? Do you think a business entity can own by the entirety, like a marriage? No. Do you think a business entity can own as a JT, meaning right of survivorship?
Yeah.
LLC dies? But do they die? Corporations, do they die? They do?
Bankrupt.
Right. Great. But is it possible that they'll live forever?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so how can we put a right of survivorship there? You think that's fair? No. So the only way that they can own it is either if it's one entity, and that's in severalty, right? Or could be 2 entities buying, and they are ticks. Okay? So remember that for the state exam. Business ownership can only be sole or tick. Okay? It's the easiest way to remember. For state exam, they will not ask you anything further than that. Okay? Corporation, we talked about corporation already a little bit. When I said LLC, it's one type of ownership. It's just that it's a limited liability company. The corporation, what you need to remember is that it's a shield. Okay? Corporation is a shield. What is a shield? It's a complete separation between you as an individual and you as a business. Complete separation between you as an individual and you as a business. Because like you said, the company can go bankrupt, right? If the company goes bankrupt, can the creditors come after me as an individual? No. If somebody sues you, sues the let's say I own the property, let's say this building, somebody slips and falls and they sue, the company has to have insurance. What if they don't? Then they sue the company directly, correct? What if the company only has $1? Can they come after you personally? If you have a corporation or an LLC, the answer is no, right? So the corporation is a shield. It's a separation of liability, okay? That's one of the things you need to remember. Now, under a corporation, we have ownership by stockholders. Ownership by stockholders. Key things to remember. Ownership by stockholders. There's an elected board of directors that oversee the business. Board of directors. So for corporations, we have a board of directors. So it's owned by stockholders. And there's a board of directors. Things to remember. Okay? Now, if you are, guys, everyone at home and you guys here as well, if you are a stockholder, then who owns the real estate? The corporation. Correct. So do we own real estate?
Percentage of the corporation.
Correct. So what we own, guys, what we own when we have a corporation, we own stock. And stock, we talked about it yesterday, is intangible personal property. The corporation owns real property. Okay? The corporation owns real property. If there's only one corporation that owns it, what type of ownership do they have? Which is called? You got to get it right once, man. Just once at least. Severalty. Tenancy and severalty. Think about a lot of people. Several people. And T. Cut. Several cut. Several T. There you go. There you go. So, one owner, tenancy and severalty. The real estate is owned by the corporation. We own personal property called stock. Okay? Very good. And like it says here, you can own it in severalty or as tenants in common if it's a corporation. Now, partnership. Okay, look right here on the screen real quick. Ready? Ready? Never, ever, ever, ever do a partnership, please. Ever. You know why? Because a partnership is extended liability. Now, there's general partnership and there's limited partnership where you can reduce the liability a little bit. Okay? If you're a limited partner, right, you might not be liable for anything that the partnership did, only to the extent of your investment. So if you put $10,000, you're a limited partner, classified on paper that you are a limited partner, guess what? You only lose $10,000, right? But if you are a general partner, and there's not enough money to satisfy, we don't have a shield. So that means that I might be forced to sell my house to satisfy our bills. You understand? If we get sued for $1 million and we only have collectively, right, in the company, we only have collectively $10,000 each, right? That's $40,000. But guess what? You don't have a house, you don't have a house, you don't have a house. Neither one of you have a house, but I do, as an example. I might have to sell my personal property to satisfy the partnership debts. Are you guys understanding this? Partnership is just an extended liability. Don't do it. Okay? It's great for tax purposes. Great for tax purposes, but you have full liability for debts and obligations. All the partners. So if I don't have any assets, but you do, you have to sell to pay our bills, our debts and obligations. That's what a partnership is.
Marriage.
Yep, just like a marriage. The wrong kind of marriage. Okay. So Joshua, why do people enter into a partnership? What is the benefit of doing it? So it's common to enter into a partnership for raising funds for real estate. Very common. So a limited partnership where I say, hey, I'm going to run the business. All you have to do is put money. I'm raising funds. You put money, right? You are limited partners. You have no voice. You have no say. You have no participation in the business, right? I just want your money. What do you have to lose? The money you put in, right? What do you have to gain? All the profits. Any headaches? No, because I'm running the business, right? You just have to trust me enough. That's all. So it's a great way to raise money. But now, more and more, we are using LLCs to do the same thing. More and more. See, LLCs, you guys need to remember, LLCs were not around in New Jersey, for instance, until probably like 10, 15 years ago. It wasn't as common in New Jersey. It was a common thing in Nevada and Delaware, Wyoming, right? But not as common here. Now it's becoming more popular. LLCs. And what is an LLC? It's a hybrid. Why is it called a hybrid? It's a hybrid between a corp and partnership. Okay, hybrid between a corp and a partnership. So it gives you that shield or that protection or separation between you as an individual and you as a business. It gives you that protection, right? That's why all my properties are under LLCs. Each one has its own LLC, right? But it has the advantages or tax benefits of a partnership. And it's also easier to manage than a corporation. Corporations could be complicated, okay? So an LLC is a hybrid or a mix. It combines features of a corporation and a limited partnership, right? Good so far? Great. Okay. Any questions? Let me know before I move forward. Questions? Lidiane, you good? Okay. At home, if you have questions, put a question mark so I know you're typing something. Andrea wrote sometimes marketing. Yeah, we can use people to for marketing. Yeah, well, that was to Joshua as an answer. I get it, but what I'm saying is we can create LLCs for a lot of stuff, not just for real estate. We can create partnership for a lot of stuff, not just for real estate. Either way, I would stay away. It's so easy to open up an LLC nowadays in any state that I would always prefer an LLC versus a partnership, always. But anyway, you need to talk to your CPA to see your current situation. Is it worth opening up a corporation? Is it worth opening up an LLC? Or should you just stick to a partnership or some type of sole ownership, okay? Sole proprietorship, I'm sorry. So you guys need to decide which one is best for you, okay? Next page. Condominiums. You guys know what this is, condominium? You've seen this before? This word, condominium, right? Okay, so condominiums pretty much means airspace and common elements. Okay? You can also call it a shoebox. Call it a shoebox. Why call it a shoebox? Because all you own is what's inside that box. That's it. The airspace. That's all you own. And you have interest or rights in the common elements, like a gym, a pool, parking, right? The maintenance, right? That's what you have with a condominium. Shoebox. Okay? Look, from the wall, from the paint inward is yours. You chip the paint, it's no longer your property. So anything beyond the paint is no longer your property. It's part of common elements. This wall right here is a common element. You understand? It's what separates one ownership from the other, but it's a common element. It's shared. You guys got it? Condominium, we own airspace. Right there. We own airspace. We share everything else. Do we own the building? No. Do you have any interest in the building itself? In the common elements? Yes, correct. But I cannot claim ownership to unit number 2. I cannot claim ownership to unit number 3 or any of the other units. It's a condominium. It's airspace only. Shoebox. Any questions before I move forward? Nope. Waiting on them at home. You guys are good. YouTubers, let me know if you have questions. I love these usernames on YouTube. I have a Little Booty Tutty BLM. Cool. I've had worse. All right, Katya's asking, what if you buy the condominium? Well, actually, that's what you buy. That's what it is. Airspace. What you buy. That's the condominium. That and the rights to use any of these. Yes, actually, there's a direct comparison between a single family, a condo, and a co-op, which we'll talk about next. There's a direct comparison. The benefit of having a condominium, and even if it's the same price, let's say it's the same price, usually it's a little cheaper, but let's say it's the same price. The benefit is I don't have to worry about the snow. I don't have to worry about the grass, right? I don't have to worry about maintenance. Somebody's going to handle that for me. That's the benefit, right? They're very easy to buy, very hard to sell. Okay? So you have to know the right type of crowd to get into this. Usually we talk about single parents, right? We talk about people that, for instance, they work in the city and live here in Jersey. They don't have the time. Between the commutes, that's it. They don't have the time to maintain. So you need to know senior citizens, they don't need the big house anymore because the kids are out the door, right? So they're downsizing. A condo will be good for those people, right? But you need to be able to explain to them, hey, there's a lot of benefits, but usually if you decide to sell, they're very difficult to sell. So be ready for that, right? Especially in areas where there's not high demand. In areas where there's not high demand, like here in New Jersey, we don't have many areas with high demand for condos. But you go to New York, there's a bunch. You go to Florida, there's a bunch. There's condos all over. You guys understand? All right, so very, very important. All right, let's go back up real quick. So I don't have anything highlighted here because I'm going to send you also a, and I'll print out for you guys, but I'll send you also a quick cheat sheet for condos versus co-ops, and also for the types of ownership that we talked about earlier. So I'll just hit a few key points for you to remember. It's not heavily tested in the exam, so it will help us move forward faster. All right. If you have any questions, put a question mark, and I'll address it. Okay. So again, what we own is we get a deed for the airspace, and again, common elements. Where it says interest and rights. Okay. You can own it jointly, in severalty, in trusts, or in any manner allowed by state law, just like a single family. You can own it the same way, just like a single family. Okay? Now, unit owners hold an exclusive interest in their individual apartments. So that's one of the things you're going to see. One of the things you're going to see is that it's individual apartments. So I'm going to go back and forth to the image, right? So right here, if this person here stops paying and they lose their home, does it affect your home?
No.
In a condo, no. It does not affect your home. In a condo, does not affect your home. In a co-op, if enough people stop paying, the whole building gets sold. So now it affects your ownership. So what you need to remember is that in a condominium, you have individual rights, individual benefits, individual claims. Okay? So you exclusively possess your apartment, right? You have your own individual mortgage and taxes and insurance. Everything is individual in a condo. Okay? It's a distinct entity. So if there's a foreclosure, it does not affect you. Okay? It affects your neighbor. Condominium units are individually assessed and taxed. Notice that I have individual highlighted in green several times. Okay? Because in the condo, again, it's individual. If my next door neighbor does not pay the taxes, do I get affected? No. If my next door neighbor does not have insurance, do I get affected? No. If my next door neighbor does not pay the mortgage, do I get affected? No. If my next door neighbor does not pay the HOA fees, do I get affected? Maybe. Because now the HOAs are for the common elements. If there's not enough money, right, some bill is going to go unpaid. So the HOA is the only thing that they might get affected if neighbors don't pay, because they will have to increase to satisfy the debt. The only thing, okay? Now, to create a condominium, again, let me know if you have any questions, okay? But to create a condominium, guys, it goes based on state law. So you need to know what state law says. We'll talk about state law in the last 2 weeks of this course. We're not talking about national law, and usually the generic or the traditional way to create a condominium is we record a condominium declaration saying that this area is intended to be shared units, okay, or space. And there's a master deed. What is a master deed? First of all, the deed is where we record the transfer or the ownership. Deed is where we record the transfer or the ownership. So if there's a master deed, it involves the whole building or the whole common area. Does that make sense? Then they sell to you an individual deed to the airspace that you purchased. So there's the master deed that holds the whole ground, and then there's the one to your individual units. Okay? The declaration or the condominium declaration is where the developer is saying, hey, this is going to be treated as a condominium. This is the legal description of the property that's involved in the condominium, right? There'll be a survey of the land, common elements in all units, a plat map, provisions for the common areas. Like you see, none of this is highlighted. Okay, it's just for you to have general knowledge, barely ever tested. Identification of each unit's share of ownership in the overall property. Organization plans for creation of condo association, including bylaws. Voting rights, membership status, and liability of expenses of individual owners. And covenants and restrictions regarding use and transfer of units. Okay. In this declaration, we're also going to determine how it's going to be organized and who's going to manage the common elements. What are the owner's responsibility or individual responsibilities, right? One of the things that comes with individual responsibilities, individual units, is that you have to maintain your internal systems. So if this space is my unit, I'm responsible for maintaining it. Common sense, right? Anything outside of this, I cannot destroy, but I'm not responsible for maintaining. Okay? I cannot go to a hallway or to the pool or to the gym and start destroying everything because there's a maintenance plan. I cannot do it. Okay? So I have to maintain the property condition and ensure the contents of the unit. Okay? Now in co-ops, if you guys go to the next page, in co-ops, we have, it's not individual, it's shared ownership. Shared ownership. Co-ops or cooperatives, we are cooperating in the ownership of this building. Okay? So in a co-op, we own shares. This is key. If we own shares, it's a corporation, right? If we own shares, it's a corporation that owns the building. And you have personal property. Remember that? We said that not too long ago. If you own shares, you have personal property. The corporation owns the building. Okay? So what do you really get besides the shares or stock? What do you get? You get a proprietary lease. To occupy a unit. So you are called a tenant shareholder. So you are a tenant shareholder. You rent a unit and you happen to own stock in the corporation. You guys understand? So you are a glorified tenant because you get benefits in the building. It's the first step up from being a renter. A renter, you have no benefits. You just rent, period. Right? You make no money with the building. You have pretty much no tax benefits out of being a renter. Being a co-op owner, you own stock, so you have some type of ownership, stock in the building. If the building goes up in value, guess what? Your stock goes up in value. Other than that, you're a tenant. Okay? Being a tenant, you have to be approved by a board of directors. Being a tenant, you do not own the unit, you just rent the unit. Being a tenant, you have to be approved by a landlord, the board of directors, right? Co-op is just we buy an apartment building and we decide to sell stock in the apartment building. That's all it is. So it's the same thing as a condo minus the individual ownership. It's the same thing as an apartment renting plus some type of ownership. That's the best way I can explain. You can go to any building. There's personal co-ops and there's business co-ops. So there's even co-ops for business buildings. Okay.
Are those easier to sell than a condominium?
Nope. Nothing other than a single family or a multifamily is easy to sell. Everything else is complicated structures. Not everybody's interested in buying. Not every bank finances. Because in a co-op, the bank is financing the purchase of stock. So what's the guarantee for the bank? Difficult. Yeah. It is something, but it's difficult to give a true value. Okay? So it's very risky, actually. Rana says, is it similar to using Airbnb? It's not similar to using Airbnb, but you can create a co-op and turn it into an Airbnb. So all the owners of the building might have an Airbnb if that's the agreement. There's another restriction with co-ops. You see, with a condo, it's your unit, so you can rent your unit to somebody else, Airbnb, right? In a co-op, the rules or the bylaws might not allow you to sublease, because remember, you're a tenant. So you might not be able to do an Airbnb run at all, okay? You are a tenant without termination, like there's no end in sight, because you own the stock. So it allows you to rent forever, as long as you are the owner of stock. Okay, that's the difference between a regular rental where it's, hey, it's a 1-year rental or month to month, and if we decide to leave, that's it. Here you have some type of security because you're a stockholder. That's the difference. But again, as a co-op, you lease or you rent that space and you have shared or common elements, just like an apartment. Okay? Next page. We have interest and rights and obligations, just like in the condos. Okay. As you know, the co-op is the one that owns, or the corporation is the one that owns the building. You own stock. So the co-op owner neither owns the unit nor undivided interest in the common elements. That's a big difference from the condos. Okay, you get what's called a proprietary lease, right? Proprietary lease that allows you to be in your unit with no rent. Okay. Yeah, there's no rent. What we have is a share or a monthly assessment for taxes, mortgage, insurance, and all that. We don't have a rent because we're owners of what? Of stock. Okay. Expense liability. The failure of individual shareholders to pay monthly expense assessments can destroy the investment of all other co-op owners. And if the co-op owners cannot pay the bills, by any other means, then what happens? Forecloses on the entire property. Again, the difference between condo and co-op. Condo, you have your own unit. If your neighbor stops paying, it doesn't affect you. Co-op, if 2, 3, 4, 5 neighbors stop paying, the whole building could get sold. So even you that's been paying on time could lose your unit. Right? Could you lose your investment? That's one of the risks. All right? And finally, next page, we have time scams. All right? There's two different types of time scams. It could be either a lease or it could be freehold. So you either own it or you rent it. All right? A lot of people don't understand this because it says timeshare, right? Because it says timeshare, which could be also an Airbnb run. Because it says timeshare, we are sharing time in a building. So think about this. We're going to buy this building right here, right? And I'm entitled to use this space 1 week out of the year. That's what it is. There's more units in the building, and we can rent those units or sell those units to individuals for that 1 week. What we're selling is that 1 week. Okay? You're either renting or you're selling the 1 week. What's the difference between them as far as selling or renting? You still only have 1 week. The difference is if the timeshare or the building goes up in value, so does your timeshare. If you're renting, you're just renting for that 1 week. It's like a scheduled vacation. That's what it is, right? So there's a lot of risk there. Andrea, you pay for the time you spend, like a condo. Yep. You pay for the time you spend. The thing that they don't tell you about this is that with a timeshare, you're not just buying that 1 week. You're buying that 1 week and then you're responsible for taxes, maintenance, insurance for the whole year. It's going to be divided by all the owners of the timeshare, but you don't have a 1 week responsibility. You have a whole year responsibility they have to pay for. That's one of the things they don't tell you. And it's worse than condos to sell. You get a timeshare, if you don't use it, you really lose it. If you ever heard that term, if you don't use it, you lose it. Timeshares is exactly that. Stephanie, what's the point in that? In timeshares? Think of it as a forced vacation. For some people, look, there's people that can save money, right? There's people that need to be forced to save money. Does that make sense? Some people can budget without a problem. Some people need to be forced to budget. Some people can go on vacation whenever they want because they know how to budget for it. Others need to be forced to do so. A timeshare is great to force you to take advantage of it because it's money wasted if you don't, right? So that's how I see a timeshare. I need to go on vacation. Let me buy a timeshare, so he forces me. Like my business partner, that's one of the things that he did. He purchased 60 weeks or whatever it is that he told me, right? He purchased a bunch of weeks, right? And now he goes on more vacations than he ever did in his whole lifetime. Kind of forces him to do so. You guys understand? Whatever way you want to take it, but that's pretty much what I would say. Timeshares. I call them time scams because most people cannot take the vacation. Most people will never use the timeshare. And then you'll realize, and we're done with this chapter. You can just highlight this. You'll realize after you get the prospectus, which is after you sign and purchase, you'll realize that there's limitations to it. Meaning, Stephanie, let's say you have next week is your week in this timeshare, right? And you cannot go. You're going to send a message to all your friends to say, hey, I'm going to waste it anyway, so would you like to go for me if you can, right? Maybe even asking for $500 or $300. Maybe you're asking for money to exchange. You cannot go, but I'll rent it to somebody that can, right? It's next week. A lot of these timeshares have a restriction of 90 days, meaning you got to wait 90 days for that change to happen. Or plainly saying you should have told me 90 days ago. You got it, Steph? That's the problem. People only get this information after they purchase. A lot of people don't even know what to ask, right? Before they purchase. Andrea M, yeah, that's what I was saying. You can rent it to somebody else, but the problem is there's restrictions. That's the problem. Okay? You can recover your money if you know ahead of time that you won't be able to go there. Barely any of these timeshares have a protection that, hey, tomorrow you can't come, switch and bring somebody else. Don't have it. Okay? So it sucks. You guys have any questions in this chapter before we go on break? You guys good? Good? Thumbs up? Great. All right, cool. So it's now 7:45. I'm going to give you guys 15 minutes to relax, and then we're going to come back to the next chapters. So 8 o'clock, we are back. Go for your coffee, go for your water, go to the bathroom, go eat, go do whatever you got to do. Be back on time. We're going to have a new QR code for you to scan in, okay? So make sure you're back on time. See you guys in a bit.